Welcome to our 12th day of the 12 Days of Christmas, where we're kind of digging into the nitty-gritty, some of the smaller stories and some of the more intriguing little moments that may not be large enough for a full sermon or a sermon series, but definitely stuff that we may not get to hear every year. So today we're looking at our final passage, which is this 12-year-old Jesus. So we're skipping forward quite a bit from some of the others, and we're getting into this last passage before Jesus moves into his adult ministry. So this is in the Gospel of Luke, and so we're starting in chapter 2, and we are going through, starting at verse 41. Each year his parents went to Jerusalem for the Passover festival. When he was 12 years old, they went up to Jerusalem according to their custom. After the festival was over, they were returning home, but the boy Jesus stayed behind at Jerusalem. His parents didn't know it. Supposing that he was among their band of travelers, they journeyed on for a full day while looking for him among their family and friends. When they didn't find Jesus, they returned to Jerusalem to look for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple. He was sitting among the teachers, listening to them and putting questions to them. Everyone who heard him was amazed by his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were shocked. His mother said, "Child, why have you treated us like this? Listen, your father and I have been worried. We've been looking for you." Jesus replied, "Why were you looking for me? Didn't you know that it was necessary for me to be in my Father's house?" But they didn't understand what he said to them. Jesus went down to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them. His mother cherished every word in her heart. Jesus matured in wisdom and years, and in favor with God and with people. Can you imagine Mary and Joseph's sheer horror at wondering whether or not they lost the Son of God? Many of us have had that moment where your kid hid underneath a clothing rack, or managed to get lost in a grocery store where you turned to look one way and they went the other. And there's that masterful panic moment until you find the kid. Usually a store associate had brought them to the front, and there's a page over the top, or you finally see their toes peeking out from underneath the rack. Either way, there's that moment where many of us have where the game of hide and seek seems to have gone a little wrong. A lot of times it's not even something that anyone else finds out about, just that moment where we wonder where our kid is or what's happened. Pure panic. So I can only imagine how Mary must have felt in her situation, and Joseph as well. What has happened? Where is he? I don't even want to know what you'd be running through your head on how you're explaining to God how you lost his son. So then they finally find him 3 days later at the temple. Now, when you go to the temple in Jerusalem, all that's left is the foundation of the temple. Now, part of that is what we call the Wailing Wall, which is a great place for prayer of both people who are Jewish and people who are Christian. And then I'm trying to remember the direction, I think it's the south side, are the steps. And there's still the steps that would have led up into the temple. And in those steps were the same steps that were there when Jesus was alive. And so you can sit on the stairs where Jesus questioned the rabbis of the time, the teachers of the time. That must have been remarkable. It was amazing to sit there. Someday, if you ever get a chance to go to Israel, I would highly recommend moments like that. But anyway, they finally find him. They find him there, learning and listening and asking difficult questions. And they chastise him. They said, "Where were you? What's going on? Why? We've been looking everywhere for you." See, I also picture this as something like, "Boy, if you weren't the Son of God." Just some of that. And then Jesus goes, "What do you mean you're looking for me? Shouldn't you have known where I'd be? Right here in my Father's house." I imagine that there was a mix between, Jesus was giving a very real answer, and at the same point, I wondered if Mary and Joseph were like, "Oh my gosh, teenagers, am I right?" Now he's at 12, but realizing that in that culture, men were considered fully adults much earlier, and were given major responsibilities. And so this is probably the last year where Jesus, probably one of the last times that Jesus was able to wander amongst his family members and others from Nazareth. And they all kind of caravan together. I would imagine that for the most part, the kids ran with one another, and as they all trekked back and forth from Nazareth to Jerusalem. But can you imagine losing the Son of God? I used to think, like, how wise must Jesus have been to have been asking those questions of rabbis? And sometimes now I think that's a pretty normal thing. Some of my most interesting and difficult questions to answer come from one of two groups: 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, and then middle schoolers. Both of these groups end up coming to you with things that maybe they didn't hear about before. With the 3 and 4-year-olds, it's questions about why can't we touch God? Why do things happen where people get hurt? Why does God? I mean, a lot of stuff like that, and then a lot of things like questions about how God made things, and really specific moments. Why did God not make us unicorns? And you can point out rhinoceros, which is pretty close to a unicorn. Anyway, the other part is middle schoolers, and a lot of times as I teach confirmation, I have great, really in-depth conversations about who God is, based off of students sharing with me things that they've heard other students talking about, or what they've heard in class, or what they've heard other people say Christians do. And so part of me thinks that this is a very, very normal thing for a middle schooler to have questions that make pastor or rabbis think really hard. And then the other part of me goes, maybe this could have been something where this was clearly that God portion of Jesus coming out, where he's starting to understand or starting to allow himself into that teacher role. Either way, it'd be really interesting to think about both sitting on those steps and hearing the questions of Jesus, and also being his parents and wondering where he was. And still, thirdly, what if you're one of the bystanders that happened to catch one of those awkward moments where the parents came upon Jesus and they were mad and frustrated and scared, but at the same point they were so joyful to have him back and to know that he was safe. Well, this ends our 12 days of Christmas, and I hope you have enjoyed our time together. I hope this has been a blessing for you. I'd love to hear any follow-up questions that you've got. So I hope you had a blessed Christmas season, and that this brought you a little bit more information, a couple more moments to connect with God in your free time. Have a blessed day.